the sense that there's no way, once these groups have bargained with each other, there's no way that you can make anybody better off without making at least one of the groups or people worse off. So in principle, the Coase theorem would allow you to address air pollution without any corrective taxes. So, first of all, let's suppose that an oil refinery, or to take an example, let's suppose that an oil refinery emits pollution that affects a closed town. So we actually have like an example of that very close by, which is Chevron runs a refinery up in Richmond, and it does release a lot of pollution that affects Richmond, and there's sort of perpetually I guess I would say there's some degree of negotiation going on between Chevron and the city of Richmond in terms of, how much or what the pollution levels will be. So there's sort of two possibilities here under the Coase theorem, right? So where we sort of are thinking of a case where you have two groups here. One is the town, and then the other is the oil refinery. So one possibility is we could assign the clean air rights to the town. We could say, the town has the right to have clean air, and in that case, then the firm has to pay the town for the right to pollute, either that or it has to install some sort of pollution control equipment that would eliminate the pollution. And then the other alternative, of course, is that we could assign the clean air rights to the refinery. So in that case, then the town is going to pay the refinery to reduce emissions or potentially to install pollution control equipment. So in either case, it should be the case that we get somewhat less pollution, or we have a reduction in pollution relative to sort of the free market equilibrium where there's no assignment of rights, right? So in the free market equilibrium, presumably the firm or the refinery is just going to emit however much pollution it wants to produce however much oil it wants, and the air will be relatively polluted. So either way, if we assign the clean air rights to the town or to the refinery, we should get a reduction in pollution relative to that equilibrium. And so you can sort of see that graphically. Now this is a simplified example, so these curves are all linear and so forth, and we can start thinking about what happens when they become nonlinear. But I just want to sort of give a very simplified example where the outcome is actually the same, regardless of whether you assign the rights to the firm or to the town. So what we have here is we have the amount of oil production on the x-axis, and then values on the y-axis. So I have two curves there. So one is the marginal revenue curve. So that's basically, you want to think of that as being like the price of a barrel of oil. So that's how much revenue the firm gets for each unit of oil that it produces. And that's I guess really gasoline because it's refining it. But at any rate, that's a flat curve because we're thinking about selling gasoline onto like the statewide or nationwide market. So it's not really facing like a downward sloping demand curve because this is just a single refinery and there's many refineries out there. And so sort of on the margin, you producing an additional barrel of oil or additional gallon of gasoline doesn't actually affect the price of gasoline that you get. So you just have that flat marginal revenue curve, and then we have this upward marginal cost curve. So I wrote MPC there because it's the marginal private cost, which is basically the marginal cost for the firm to produce an additional barrel of oil. And so N star, or N prime, I guess, is going to be the equilibrium absent any sort of intervention here, because the firm is going to produce up to the point at which the cost of producing that oil is equal to the revenue that it gets from that oil. The marginal cost of producing it is equal to the marginal revenue they get. So then let's think about the two scenarios that I mentioned, right? So the first scenario is the town is going to own the rights, and it's going to charge the firm the marginal social cost of air pollution. So basically, the idea here is the town owns the rights. The town doesn't just say, like, so one possibility is the town says, look, you can't produce any oil because we don't want any pollution in our town, and then the firm has to shut down because the town, it has that right? But realistically, that's probably not what the town is going to say, right? Because the town is going to get some benefits from the firm producing oil. First of all, there'll probably be some sort of like employment benefits that people in the town might be employed at the oil refinery. But more importantly, the town could say, like, look, we're willing to allow you to produce some oil, but you're producing pollution, and we demand to be compensated for that because we have the right to clean air. And so it could say, for each for each gallon of gasoline that you produce, we demand like $1 or something like that. Like that's sort of what we think of as the marginal social cost to us in terms of the cost of additional air pollution that's being generated from producing that additional gallon of gasoline. So in that case, when the town starts saying, like, look, we demand sort of a payment for each gallon of gasoline produced, in that case, then the cost curve that the firm faces shifts upward, right? So now you have this MPC plus MSC, so MSC is the marginal social cost, and so that curve is just a sort of a shift up by a constant of the original MPC curve. And so since the firm is now facing this higher marginal cost curve, that curve is going to intersect the marginal revenue curve at a lower quantity. So now the firm ends up producing N star barrels of oil, which is or gallons of gasoline, which is significantly below the original number N prime, and that's reflecting the fact that there is this air pollution now, there's air pollution cost now that they're taking into account, and once they take that cost into account, it becomes less attractive to produce gasoline. Okay, so that's one possibility. But then the other possibility we talked about is that the refinery owns the rights, right? So if the refinery owns the rights, then the town doesn't have any legal ability to interfere with what they do, right? So you might think, okay, well then what's going to happen is we'll end up back at N prime because the refinery owns the rights to clean air. It's just going to sort of effectively, quote unquote, use that clean air to emit pollution into it, and it's going to choose to continue producing gasoline up to the point at which the marginal cost of producing gasoline becomes higher than the amount of revenue they get from that gasoline. But that's not really true if the town and the refinery can bargain, right? So the refinery now realizes, well, the town actually benefits from us reducing production because the town, is going to have less air pollution. And if we, in particular, I think if you think about what happens when the firm sort of starts out at N prime, where it's like reducing at the equilibrium that we think of as typically being like the private market equilibrium, they're right at the margin where that last gallon of gasoline that they produce, they're pretty much indifferent about it, right? Because the cost of producing that gallon is exactly equal to the revenue that they get from selling that gallon. So like they're at the point of indifference for that last gallon, but the town isn't. The town would say, like, look, we don't like the pollution, and so we'd actually be willing to pay you like $1 if you reduced production and didn't produce that last gallon of gasoline. So the town can basically make an offer to the firm that is attractive from the firm's perspective because they'd much rather take that $1 from the town than produce that last gallon of gasoline, given that they're earning almost no profit on that last gallon, right? And so that sort of process is going to continue until the point at which the profit from producing an additional gallon of gasoline becomes high enough that sort of the town's offer is no longer high enough to dissuade the firm from producing that. And so the way that we can see that in the graph is that essentially you could think of the marginal revenue curve as being shifted down. So now instead of having the marginal revenue be this MR curve, is now like MR minus MSC, which is the marginal social cost, because from the firm's perspective, the marginal revenue that it gets from selling an additional gallon of gasoline isn't just the price of gasoline. So say the price of gasoline is like $4, so it's not that they actually get $4 when they sell that additional gallon of gasoline. They're going to get $4, but then they're essentially giving up the $1 payment that the town would make to them to not produce the additional gallon of gasoline, and so they need to sort of subtract that off from their marginal revenue curve. So that's going to shift the marginal revenue curve down, and then the firm is going to produce up to the point at which the marginal private cost is equal to that downward shifted marginal revenue curve. And you can see that the way that I drew the graph, the refinery is going to end up producing N star again, because that's the point at which the MPC and MR minus MSC curves intersect. So in this like very simplified example, we ended up with a case where regardless of whether or not you assigned the pollution rights to the firm or to the town, you got the same outcome in terms of gallons of gasoline produced. That doesn't always have to be the case, and there's only so okay, there's two things here to say. So first of all, that doesn't always have to be the case. Even when the Coase theorem is sort of working perfectly and everybody is bargaining as we would hope, it doesn't have to be the case that if you assign the rights to the firm, that you end up with exactly the same outcome as if you assign the rights to the town. The only reason it's the case in this graph is basically because like all of these curves are linear and you end up like shifting them by constants and so forth. But if we started to introduce nonlinearities and so forth, that wouldn't necessarily have to be true anymore. The thing that's really important here is that in terms of like whether or not it ends up being the case that you get the same outcome is that if the value of the property right that you're assigning, so essentially the value of this clean air right, ends up being a like significant fraction or non-trivial fraction of the amount of like wealth or resources available to one of the two groups, then that's going to have an impact on sort of which group's preferences get expressed more, and that in turn is going to have an impact on the outcome. So I'll give like a much more concrete example of that a little bit later. But I just want you to realize that the way I drew it in this like specific example, you end up with the same outcome either way, but that doesn't always have to be the case. So in the last 10 minutes, I think I want to like break into the groups and have you guys sort of discuss two scenarios with the Coase theorem. So the first scenario is taken from a few years ago and relates to the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that BP caused. And so I think that's actually back in the news again, just coincidentally, because they're in court right now and trying to get out of some of the judgment that was levied against them. So it's something it's like in the teens of billions of dollars or something like that. They're supposed to be paying to.
How much they're responsible, and BP got the majority of the responsibility.
Right.
And they decided that there was one negligence that wouldn't have been that, and there was one that was really bad, and they decided to do that.
The court decided that. Right. And so BP is presumably trying to fight or appeal that. But this was from this particular slide was from a couple years earlier, where so it hadn't gone through the courts yet, and Congress was still sort of deciding how much they wanted to try to hold BP liable. And so, the article title was BP says limits on drilling and peril spill payout. So BP was let me say BP had been held liable, but Congress was deciding sort of what kinds of limits it wanted to place on oil drilling going forward in the Gulf of Mexico. And so there's sort of this kind of like ironic article, but basically BP was saying, so it says BP is warning Congress that if lawmakers pass legislation that bars the company from getting new offshore drilling permits, it may not have enough money to pay for all the damages caused by its oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. So basically they're saying like, look, we know we caused $60 billion of damage. The only way that we're going to be able to pay for that is we let's drill more, and so then we'll get more money and then we can pay you back for all the damage we caused from our previous drilling. Which there's a little bit of like a circular logic there maybe, but when we think about it in terms of the Coase theorem, we do have a case where essentially the property rights of the Gulf of Mexico belong to the federal government, and we can assume that I wouldn't necessarily assume, but let's just for the sake of argument assume that the government charges BP the appropriate amount. So in that case, we would think, okay, we have a case where the property rights have been assigned. There's sort of two parties here. There's BP and the federal government. They can clearly negotiate with each other, and so the Coase theorem should hold. But if BP couldn't pay for the damage in this case, so BP was basically saying, like, we don't think we can afford to pay for this damage unless you let us drill more. So if they couldn't pay for the damage, would there be a market failure here? And if so, why isn't the externality being fully internalized? Shouldn't charging a fee for the damage be sufficient? So we've got about like 5 minutes left. So I think. So here's my plan. So I want you guys to discuss this basically discuss these last two questions in your group. So essentially, BP is saying we can't pay for the damage. So I'm saying like these first two bullet points, the property rights belong to the federal government. That's very clear. The government and BP can negotiate. That's very clear as well. So it seems like the criteria that we need for the Coase theorem to hold do in fact hold. But if BP cannot pay for the damage, is there some sort of market failure here, or is this just kind of like still an efficient outcome and we should be comfortable with it? And if there is a market failure, then why isn't the externality being fully internalized? So I want you guys to discuss those questions in your groups for really just for like the last 5 minutes here, and then I have another example of a case that's like very sort of topical in the sense that it's coming straight out of like the papers in the last week or so. So there's another example of a case that involves the Coase theorem, and I think I'll have you guys sort of pick up on Friday discussing that, and then we'll sort of go around the room and determine what the different groups thought. So why don't you guys start by discussing this, and then I'm going to introduce that second case on Friday morning.